You're listening to a Meatsmith Harvest. This is the podcast that encourages and equips you to grow your home around the harvest. We'll begin with that.
Okay.
That little hiccup.
So we have a special guest this morning on the Meatsmith podcast.
Yes, we do. Well, she's been with us the last couple podcasts, but she's on the outside.
She hasn't been contributing very much to the podcast.
This is Ignatia Ann Therese. We call her Therese. So she'll be with us for the first part of the podcast until she gets a little bit fussy, because she is a little bit of a fussy baby.
Yeah. It's hard being that small.
But we are extremely delighted to introduce you. So thanks for following us on this baby journey, everyone. We are excited to have an official baby announcement. She's about a month old now. And you want to give a little debriefing on the birth story?
Oh, I guess so.
Our fans might enjoy that.
Yeah, well, she was born on May 23rd.
It happened, despite our plans.
It did happen. And Vashon is a tricky thing to navigate when you're trying to have a baby off island. Vashon is an island on which we live. And we've had all of our babies at home, except for one, Simon, and now Therese. But Therese she came fast. She came with rapidity and quickly. And so she kind of jumped the gun on us a little bit. And she ended up being born en route, on the way to the birthing inn, which is a place where you go and rent a space and work with a midwife.
In Tacoma,
which is the closest city to Vashon Island. And
which we highly recommend, by the way.
Yeah, they're wonderful. The birthing inn.
I'll put a link in the show notes for that one, because they are a great facility.
Yeah, they're
great
awesome.
Midwives. Yeah.
But and from our home, if you add the ferry, it's probably 18 minutes away. Mm-hmm.
It's not
bad. On the other hand, if you miss the last ferry of the evening off of the south end of our island, then what? It's 20 plus 15.
Oh, it adds like another hour and a half or more.
Yeah, it's like an hour and 40 minutes away. Because you have to go all the way to the north end of the island and wait for a boat. Anyway, exactly the thing we were trying to avoid. The greatest disaster that we allowed ourselves to imagine was that we would be rushing to catch the last ferry off of the island in the wee hours of the morning before the commuter ferries start. And that happened to be the 2:40 a.m. ferry, Therese.
What?
And the next one was 5 a.m.
Uh-huh.
So naturally, that's the one we caught.
Yeah.
And we could tell that things were progressing, not least of all because the car ride from the south end to the north end of the island ended up being, shall we say, encouraging lots of active labor.
It was basically one long contraction.
20-minute contraction.
Yeah, 30-minute contraction.
Yeah, which means she was ready to go. And
yeah.
So we called the EMTs on Vashon.
Yeah.
They came. We switched vehicles. And we got on the ferry boat, got to the other side, and then started racing south, backtracking, just off the island now.
And at this point, I started feeling a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, guys, have you guys delivered a baby before?
There were 3 guys in there.
And they all looked at me with like deer in headlights.
Yes, they had not delivered babies.
They hadn't.
But they were great. One of them actually has taken a class, a Farmstead Meatsmith class. The captain,
right.
He was the pilot, and they were wonderful. We're still trying to...
Actually, I called him yesterday.
Oh, you did?
I've got a meeting on the table. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
We're going to go take our crew and go say hello and take some pictures of the fire truck that she was born in.
They were so accommodating. They were super polite and on the ball. They were just awesome.
But they were a little inexperienced in this one. I mean, 2 of them were brand new.
Oh, were they?
Just recently,
cool.
Sworn in.
Yeah.
And so I have to sing Brandon's praises here, because at that point I knew that they were not going to deliver this baby, and Brandon had delivered several of our babies already, or just being present there with a midwife, kind of partly catching them. So Brandon caught the baby, and
you know
what?
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but
okay.
I just realized I've only really, delivered is a flattering word for what happens. I catch.
Yeah.
I've only done that when medical professionals are present.
That's true. Okay, yeah.
So isn't that funny?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a testament to your prowess with bodies.
Yeah.
And knowing what to do.
The first time was with Simon, and he was coming out, and the doctor did not notice.
Yeah, she was looking at the machines.
She was looking at the machines, not at the mama. And so I have this habit of ripping my shirt off during birth because I want to put the infant right on my skin, skin to skin, nice and warm and cozy.
Yeah.
And so I caught Simon that way because she was just not noticing.
A little absent.
And then Therese.
Yeah.
But it's really not. It's catching. It's like.
Yeah, I kind of guided him, as well as the guys, the EMTs in the car with us.
She coached us all. She encouraged them. Lauren's a team player. It's from your volleyball background, I guess. You guys are doing great. We actually said that a few times.
Did I?
Yeah. And we're all just sitting there like, oh, we're not doing much.
Yeah.
I guess we're doing it well then. Hurry up and wait.
Anyway, it was a great experience.
Yeah.
I'd have to say.
Yeah, because in spite of the fact that it was the worst thing we allowed ourselves to imagine, and that actually happened, it was totally fine. It didn't matter at all.
Everyone
It
was
was
safe.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was born on the ambulance en route somewhere around Gig Harbor, we think. And
we had fun filling out the birth certificate.
Yeah.
We're like, where exactly did it happen? And it took some figuring.
Yeah. It's 16 South.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes later, we were at the birthing inn, and she had already started nursing at that point. So
yeah,
everything was awesome.
Yeah. She came out and she let out a little yell, and then very quickly just started napping on my chest. It was really cute.
Yeah. So
So anyway, she is with us, the 6th sheared Meatsmith child.
Yep.
To help us in our culinary adventures.
Yeah, the impetus for the curing of more bacon.
That's right.
More bacon eaters.
Anyway, so we're pleased. Oh, she's giving us a little smile.
That's good.
Yeah. So I guess let's move on into the announcements. That was our baby announcement, which we're most proud of. But we've got a few other, actually this one announcement we're also pretty proud of. This podcast has reached over 10,000 downloads.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's been, I thought I turned the printer off. That's been...
It's definitely because of our professionalism.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's because of you listeners. So thank you so much for following us on this podcast and this video podcast now here on YouTube or on iTunes if you're listening on iTunes. If you have a chance, continue to rate and review us there or leave some comments in the YouTube section. They really help let other people know about this podcast. And oh my gosh, there's been a few reviews on the iTunes website, and they're so beautiful. So thank you for the people that have left reviews there. It inspires us to continue doing these, even with newborn babies. Oh, and if you can, consider becoming a Patreon member, because that's how we can continue to expand and grow. Brandon and I have got some new ideas in the works that hopefully we can roll out in the next year and try to expand this podcast. And yeah, so patreon.com/Meatsmith is a great way that you can support us doing this.
Yeah, one thing that having a child enables is research and development meetings, or
Yes.
definitely revisioning the future staff
Yeah.
meetings.
That's what we're doing right now.
So that's, yeah.
We're looking at each other like, how much should we reveal right now? But
yeah, we can't. We are not. You're not allowed to be very productive when you have an infant in the house. So we schedule a big break for normal Meatsmith work just because of Therese, but that does leave some room for a little more contemplation and forward thinking.
Yeah, research and development.
Yeah.
Envisioning, which we both have. Brandon's more the technician of our business, and I'm more the manager. But we both share this visionary kind of element to the business. So we've been able to do that, and
I don't know what the vision is, but
we're honing in. We're working on ourselves a little bit too, trying to see what is doable. And it's interesting when you own your own business. Sometimes you have to go back to the drawing boards, and in order to, as we say, circle the wagons, you have to still expand. There's no stagnation allowed in small business ownership. You have to constantly be changing, even though you just want to coast and you want to maintain and you want to find this plateau. That's actually the way that you decline.
Yeah,
so
and I think
wrestling with that right now.
One thing we also learned is that I don't think we'd be happy if we plateaued.
Yeah.
If it was,
we're both.
If we did just find the perfect system, the perfect little reliable, dependable calendar obligations, to generate income for the family. I don't think that's our personality. As much as we long for order, I think that would feel we'd get bored.
Yeah.
We would get we'd feel oppressed by that.
We do tend to feel, I feel at least, comfortable in a little element of chaos.
Yeah, we feel more alive when we're reaching out.
Yeah,
and
even though it is killing us.
Yeah.
But anyway, too much detail. The point is we're in a transition period, and we're really excited about it, and we want to grow this podcast, and it will involve, because we've reached our max. We've promised several times, we're going to get more podcasts out. We're going to get more podcasts out. And we can just kind of maintain one a month. So we know that we've reached our max capacity, but we are getting ready to hire some people. And just expand the team, which is always a little scary, but we're excited to see if we can find some creative people to help us with some productions and YouTube creations. Therese, I'm putting Therese to sleep here. Hopefully I'm not putting you to sleep. But anyway, the best way you can help us with that, like I said, is supporting us as a patron on patreon.com/Meatsmith.
And also the Meatsmith membership, which is probably going to be the locus of our new focus, is to really put our efforts into enhancing and improving and increasing the diversity of the membership.
We're going to be trying to push all the energy we have toward growing the membership, and to that end, trying to create more free content that will help drive traffic and drive excitement and energy to the membership to help fund everything, because that is what's sustaining us right now. So we've got these other side things, actually, like pork shares and things, which are good, but we really want to pour our energies into the membership and improving the membership too. So we're not currently registering for membership at this point, but we will in a few months. So keep your eyes and ears out for all the improvements that'll be happening to that end. Oh, and one thing, and I should say, this is not at all a side thing. This is definitely in congruence with the membership are our classes, and we are selling a couple of really great classes at this moment. So, membership is for people that absolutely can't get to us personally, but we highly encourage our classes. And right now we've got our 3-day family pig, which we've been doing for a handful of years now. People come from all over the world to join us in these events. And we've got one in late October and one in mid-November of 2018. So sign up there. I've got one that's already halfway sold out, and a couple more people have chimed in and spoken up. So I know that they're going to sell very, very quickly here this summer. The other class, which is kind of a custom class, we only do 1 or 2 of these a year, is in Minnesota, Mora, Minnesota. And it's a 1-day intensive. We've got a member that lives out there, and he is going to slaughter his own pig. So, with Brandon's guidance and all of the information we've been getting out to him, he's going to slaughter it. And then Brandon's going to show up, and they're going to spend a full day butchering it, cooking it, kind of showing our 3-part culinary methodology, and then making sausage and, of course, curing everything. So you don't want to miss it if you're out in the Midwest or on the East Coast, or you're within a nice flight distance to the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great event, and I highly recommend trying to make it out.
It'll be good because the slaughter will already have been done, so we can spend a little more focused time on whole carcass utilization, turning the whole thing into food.
Yeah.
Without compromise, not being like, oh man, I have to eat the tail, or
Yeah.
what do I do with the head? But
Yeah.
actually looking forward to those things, because that's what braising, pan frying, and roasting can do for you.
Yeah. So that's Friday, October 19th. If you can, mark your calendars and try to fly in on a Thursday and then fly out on that Saturday, just like Brandon, and spend the whole day just talking pork, talking shop with Brandon and other farmers just like you flying in.
It's a great crowd. I did an Ohio class, and whenever we do those middle of the country classes, we get a lot of really cool people.
People fly up from Florida, Canada, New York. Like, it's kind of becomes this hub.
Yeah, come way down from even the Upper Peninsula, and a lot of them are in various stages of pursuing an agrarian life. Some are full-time farmers, some are part-time farmers, some are butchers that are also raising some pigs.
Some are hobbyists.
Yeah, and it's the actual content of the class and what I'm able to communicate is a fraction of what people take home. Yeah. It's really the networking and the connections that they make, because they're going back to every corner of the country, and they're able to then get with people that are from the same region and then tailor their curing to that. Because so much of this is seasonal, and it's all dependent upon the proper environment for traditional curing methods. And it's great to have someone else in the South, for example, with you trying to cure ham in 98% humidity and 98 degrees Fahrenheit, which is tricky. How do you do that? But there's no shortage of traditions to guide you in that way, and it's nice to have partners exploring also.
Yeah, and we've continued to stay in touch with all those people too. So anyway, consider all those classes, the family pig this fall, as well as in Minnesota. Without further ado, let's dive into the content. This is the second part in a 3-part series that is kind of unfolding before us on meat preservation. And our last podcast was on meat or whole muscle curing. And so we really talked about bacon and how all the whole muscle cures can be understood within the context of bacon.
Yeah.
Everything is bacon, but pretty much.
Yeah. In fact, that word used to mean cured with dry salt.
Right. Yeah. Any part of the pig.
Yeah. Cured with dry salt.
So then this second part will be on meat fermentation. So basically salami. We'll talk about that. And then our next podcast will be on confit.
Yeah.
So preserving with fat. But before we dive into the fermentation, there was a loose end that when I was editing our last episode, I wanted to ask you something and I never got to it, but can you describe for us sort of the story behind how you learned how to make bacon? Like, I'm thinking about sea breeze and just kind of learning on the fly and learning through repetition and mistakes. But how do you remember it? How do you remember just your process of learning the process of?
Yeah. I think I was loosely told how to make bacon by one guy named Charlie, and I think my takeaway from that experience was that you place salt atop fresh pork bellies for an unknown amount of time, and so that was it. And then you smoke them. And when we were smoking bacon years ago, when I was working at this farm on the north end of Vashon, it was in a wine barrel, which was kind of cool. We had a remote wood burning stove in which we burned sawdust at the time, and a pipe that ran a ways uphill a little bit. I think the minimum is like 18 inches, 24 inches to actually get a draft. At least I read that in a book once. And so there does have to be an increase in elevation between the remote smoker and the chamber wherein meat is being smoked. And then it ran to the bottom of a wine barrel and piped right in through the bottom. And then I think the wine barrel was sitting on some cinder blocks. And then there were steel rods at the top that had been drilled through the top portion of the barrel. And we just hung the bacon from there. Mm-hmm. And so it was a warmish smoke, a cold warmish. It was delicious. And I think that really all of this is taste memories. It's all flavor memories. And I remember trying the bacon first, and it was so flavorful. I mean, it's unfortunate because some people describe it as being too salty. Mm-hmm. But that is because it is cured with salt. It's not just, tangified with acidifying agents such as sodium erythorbate or sodium nitrite, which have their place in the universe, but the flavor they contribute is tangy. Whereas good old school peasant bacon is cured with salt and therefore also flavored with salt. Mm-hmm. And it's salubrious marriage with fat, the flavor of fat and smoke. And so I remember tasting it and just being blown away at the intensity of the flavor and the richness. And for some reason, I wasn't cowed by that. I find, having made bacon like that for years now, it's like people, they have an expectation of what bacon tastes like. Understandably, everyone does. And you either taste the peasant bacon, the old school salt-cured bacon, and you think, wow, that is much richer and therefore superior, or you think, wow, that is much richer and therefore inferior, too much. It's just interesting. I think it's a personality thing. And for whatever reason, I just thought, oh, this is the Platonic form of bacon. Mm-hmm. This is just more of a good flavor. It's just, right. It's exponentially just off the charts. Yeah. So I definitely made lots of salty bacon at the beginning. And I remember, I didn't mind it at all. Right. I think I have a relatively high salt tolerance. So everyone should note that. Yeah. Brandon likes a lot of salt. So when you might want to knock the salt down a little bit to make it please everyone if you're using a method that I communicate. But I remember them telling me that, and so I would knock the salt down, and that's kind of where I developed the idea that I want to use salt just as a means to an end and not necessarily as an end in itself. So we're not just tasting salt pork.
It's also a generational thing too, because cultural generational, because a lot of times, I know she's way more entertaining right now than we are.
That's great. Just adding some commentary.
Yeah, but a lot of times like our parents or maybe our grandparents' generation, they've been kind of sold this idea that salt is bad. Because certain salts were bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, understandably, but, if you use good salt, it's not bad for you. So, and we're kind of finding this out now. So, a lot of times our generation is more okay with salt. Yeah. But the older generations, they take more, they're not quite as into it naturally. Yeah. Immediately.
And I think it's because I also regard things aesthetically, I think, is my basic judgment of a thing. And so when I, first started making the bacon at Seabreeze, or even first time I tried it, I wasn't thinking like a consumer. Like, ooh, do I like this? Is this something I like? I immediately just go completely superlative and transcendent and think like, is this beautiful?
Yeah.
And the making of it alone, from a really healthy pig, raised properly, killed well, scalded and scraped, and then simply and carefully cured.
Sometimes it's not, do I like it, but should I like it?
Yeah, I know. And that's, to me, it is good. Therefore,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little more receptive and docile. And if anything, I am going to decide that this is bacon ontologically.
Yeah.
And the other stuff is, an imitation of this. And so I'm going to try to make this fit. I'm going to rearrange my entire kitchen to make this fit in it and to make it work. Because this is the real deal. And it's not just, impractical, ideal, pursuing the universal epitome of bacon. It's easy to make, and I can make it simply. And that is practical, I don't have to measure anything when I make the bacon. And all of that means that it is more doable, achievable on a family scale, for me at least, for raising a pig and then turning it into bacon. And so, yes, I will change my kitchen to fit that ingredient because it is worthy of it.
Neat. Do you have any memories of when you were working at the farm, learning this, like encountering anything and going, I don't know, I haven't seen that before. Is that safe? Or is this trustworthy? Or should I just toss it? Or,
Yeah.
Because we encounter that a lot in our students. And so how did you encounter that, and did you get over that hurdle in any particular way?
Yeah, I think I was, not really. Well, I think one thing helped is that I was totally ignorant. I had zero culinary experience. And if you work in a restaurant, you rightfully learn all of the, food service safety protocol, which is totally essential, which a lot of these traditional cures like bacon and fermented meats especially completely defy.
Yeah.
And that's largely as a result of scale, and we'll talk about that too. So I did not have that baggage per se,
That's true.
So put.
Yeah, you were a blank slate.
I was a blank slate, and I was also really aesthetically motivated.
Yeah.
And the thing about spoilage is that it's ugly.
Yeah.
And I think disgust is even a reaction to like ugliness in any form. For me, it is, to be sure. And so when I smell something that smells good and it sits in a context of salubriousness, of health, and competency, then it's just not gross to me.
Yeah,
I'm very confident in it.
Trust it. Right?
I also never just took anything for granted. Like because I am a student, I read all of the most draconian warnings about making salami, or making bacon, this atypical peasant method. And I read all of the horror stories, and I still do. Anytime, it's very fadistic, this food science articles that come out, for a while it was just anathema to cold smoke meat, to cold smoke bacon. Some guy wrote an article and just got a lot of traction. And so I love to read those, and really take them seriously and see what they're saying, because we are dealing with objects in the physical universe that can be known. And I think a lot of the food science surrounding bacon, well, number one, it's geared for retail and mass production, and assuming you're starting with sickly, dirty meat. So that's a huge thing. But it's also not necessarily based on, is this safe objectively? That's not really the goal. To find out it is its liability, which is good because you have to work for the lowest common denominator. You have to assume that someone with almost malevolent intent is making the bacon and then serving it to people at a restaurant or something. You have to assume the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And then you make your code to that.
Right.
And that's just how it functions.
Yeah.
And I get it.
We're not going to overturn that anytime soon.
Yeah. And that's just how society works. And I think that so what that means is that a lot of the fears are kind of ill-defined. Mm-hmm. It's actually got this strange anti-science to it because they are exponential. The fears are, what is the word? They're exaggerated for the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. And when you actually do get down to the science and the bacteria that we have described, which is certainly not all that is involved in the curing and fermentation of meat, but you find that there's less danger. The more light you shine on it, the more knowledge you have.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that too. I've got some books I already got out that help with that technical biochemistry and microbial knowledge. That helps. It does help. And at the same time, I think it is just as unscientific to reject the testament of your senses because they're put there by biology and they operate in the same realm, specifically designed for the detection of bad guys. You've got a nose and you have taste buds and they're remarkably sensitive. And I think that if we took time to develop them, to discipline them and to school them, school our senses, they become incredibly accurate guides to what you should eat, what you shouldn't.
Right.
And a lot of that just starts with what tastes good. So pursue the flavor. And I think you will eventually work yourself into the safety because thrift and extravagance don't have to be or separate things.
Yeah.
They're not at cross purposes.
Okay. Okay, so lead us into what salami is then. Because we've covered bacon pretty extensively and whole muscle curing. What's the difference when it comes to meat fermentation?
So salami is an Italian word. And we seem to have imported lots of Italian cure names and methods. And so when you go to make salami, the tricky thing is importing Italy to wherever you are making salami. And that brings in the curing chamber thing. So what salami is a sausage, make a sausage, and then you hang it long enough for it to dry out, and then you eat it raw without cooking it. At least for our purposes, that's what it's going to be. But I think that's kind of what salami is. And there's many different varieties. Like some are quickly cured, semi-cured, they call them. And they're not hard and dense. Some are just, really quickly cured, so they're just tangy, but you would still cook them. Some are so moist that you still eat them raw, but they're spreadable. So there's just everything in between. But to make salami, the likes of which you eat raw, after it's hung around for a while and gotten dry, lost about 30% of its weight, that kind of salami requires the Mediterranean climate. And that kind of salami, that's why we import curing chambers, which is just, you're bringing Italy into,
Right.
Your environment so you can make that kind of salami. And I think that's really the trickiest thing, especially for people silly like us who are trying to create salami or cured sausages that don't require complex apparatus. There are few things more complex than a humidity and temperature controlled refrigerator. I mean, that is not a simple apparatus.
Yeah.
And you can buy them, and I think they're awesome, and I certainly want one because I love salami. They are not cheap. What I have always tried to do, and this is why my experience with salami is both limited and unique, because I have tried to make salami without any aids. in the form of climatic control at all. I just want to use the seasons I am given, and no fermentation aids in the form of cultures, and no acidifying aids in the form of nitrites. I want to create all of those things naturally as expressions of the pork, of the diet, of the fat composition, of the microbes growing on my cutting board, of the environments in which I live throughout the year, and the relative humidity and temperature, so that I can create something that wants to be made here, rather than something I have to coerce into existence through expensive apparatus. And I'm starting to find that maybe salami ain't it, because it is so distinctly Italian.
And we live in an environment that's more like Great Britain than Italy.
Yes.
If you had to pick.
Yeah. So we might be getting ahead of ourselves, but that's kind of that's salami, and it's important to define exactly what that is. Salami can be applied really loosely, and particularly by people, in my experience, combing forums and stuff, and Facebook groups, particularly by people that are trying to, for lack of a better way to put it, impose the draconian fear of botulism, which is like the number one thing on home salami making. They will list several cases from the EPA about, is that it? Who does it? I'm starting to blank on whoever keeps the list.
The CDC?
CDC, sorry, not the EPA. Yeah, lists of cases of botulism, because they do record those. They're rare enough. And the question is whether or not salami is a likely place for botulism. And I think it is, theoretically, because it is anaerobic. There's no oxygen in that little casing, just like a bad canned tomato, or jelly or something. No oxygen. And that is where the spore can produce the toxin, in that environment alone. And if you look at the CDC list, I have yet, so I'm putting this out there. This is a super major curiosity for me as a erstwhile researcher, is find a case of botulism from salami, exactly described as the sausage that is hung for long enough to be eaten raw.
So go find that.
Yeah, nothing else. I don't care about cases from ham, under-smoked ham, under-brined ham, too warm smoke, poached pig stomachs filled with blood and then poached at lower. Those are where you find botulism. Yeah. Or particularly in Eskimos, they will, if they adopt plastics in their traditional methods of like letting seabirds ferment in the ground in burlap sacks, if they replace the burlap with plastic, they create an anaerobic environment and you can get the botulism in that scenario. So those do not pertain. Yes, those prove the theoretical pathological diagnosis that Clostridium botulinum produces the spore and then produces the toxin in an anaerobic high pH environment. But it does not address the case of salami. That's the one that I want to know about. Because that is the primary reason why all of the recipe books, understandably, and again, I'm not even opposed to it, but that's why they all prescribe the use of cure number 2 or cure number 1, depending on how long the cure.
All of the English-speaking ones.
Yes.
Or American English-speaking ones.
Yeah, American books. That's why they prescribe nitrate or or nitrate, and to prevent botulism. Yeah. And it is also for the pleasant tanginess, because they do create a certain acidity and they keep things pink. So, and that is also the basis for adding cultures, and the basis for dissuading people from trying to do it in such a way that would actually create a unique product, which is what I am. I cannot stop being interested in that. It's creating, when you don't use nitrate or cultures, it's not like you create a bad salami when you do use those things. It's just you don't create a unique one. You create one that is going to taste like all the others. You remove the conditions for local expression, for terroir.
Yeah.
And whereas there's no cured product that has more potential to be an expression of the husbandry, the harvest, the place wherein the sausage is made than salami.
Yeah.
So it's just super enticing.
Is night and day.
As a thing to be truly unique from batch to batch, depending on season.
Yeah.
So you get really local seasonal expressions that can be super wonderful and delicious and truly unique. And so when you create a salami without nitrate or nitrite or starter cultures, you get nutty, sweet, cheesy flavors, not just kind of sourly, tangy things.
Yeah.
So
walk us through the mechanics of the kind of salami that we have made, that we would make, and that we have successfully made, and that we've unsuccessfully attempted. How do we do it?
Yeah. So I've always shot to make the same one. I stuff it in hog casings, which are what normal fresh sausage is stuffed in, which are of a smaller diameter than what most salami is put in. Most of them are put in beef middles or even bungs or really big ones, which are beef intestines. And so it's a smaller sausage, which requires a shorter drying period, which is the tricky element here in the Pacific Northwest, is that aging period and the slow weight loss. And so I just season it with salt and pepper and wine, maybe a little bit of garlic.
Or fennel, I think I've seen you put in.
Yeah, I think I've done fennel before. And my whole goal is to pick the season to do it in, because I don't have a temperature humidity controlled environment. I must pick the salubrious season, the season conducive to slow fermentation and slow drying. And that is the tricky part. That is the hardest thing about making salami in this region. And so what I do is I salt it 2% by weight, and that's really the only thing you have to measure. That is the essential thing. And so I tend to make my salamis from leaner pork, not quite as fatty as the fresh sausage that we make.
Okay.
Because the lean meat is what has the water, and that is the more active realm of fermentation. And this is a ferment. It must ferment. There must be bacteria in there consuming sugars, creating acid,
We're not
just like any
drying
ferment.
it.
Yeah.
Because we're introducing oxygen by the grinding mechanism.
And bacteria. You're inoculating it with good and bad bacteria. And so you add salt at the exact ratio in order to give the good bacteria an upper hand. Okay. And you'll read several books about it, but the general ratio is no less 2% by weight of meat. So you weigh the salt. It's not by volume. You must weigh it because salts will have different volumes. Flaky salt as opposed to a fine sea salt. And so you got to weigh it as a portion of the total meat to guarantee that you're getting the proper amount. And so 2% is the minimum. That's the lowest end. You would not go below that. You would go up to 3% salt by weight. And that would give you an excellent salami. And you mix that really thoroughly with the leaner meat. And what the leaner meat does as you mix it is it creates, you've heard of the myosin conversion, where it binds things. So if you pour water, but you wouldn't necessarily do that. If you pour wine into it, it is completely absorbed and bound in the meat. And so it's totally distributed. There's something really awesome about salami, and it is that you're introducing the cure, so the salt and the wine, to every single, little tiny bit of meat, as opposed to a whole muscle cure where there are pieces that are untouched. So it's really just completely incorporated. And you need to mix it by hand really thoroughly so that there's no standing wine in the bottom of the container. And so that the salt is evenly distributed. And you get the stringies and the clingies. The meat almost becomes, it's getting on its way to a paste, further and further from resembling the little wormies that came out of the grinder when you first ground it. So it's really bound all of that water. because, and all you're doing this whole time is you're creating hurdles for Clostridium botulinum and for other bad guys. And what those bad guys need are a high or, low acidity. And you're achieving the acidity by the addition of the wine and by a quick ferment. That plunges the pH down below, ideally, 4.5. And you can do, some books will say 5.3. It's got to be below that. And I think it depends on when you measure it. I don't know. I go by smell. The smell of a tangy sausage is what you want, of tangy salami. And it's unmistakable. It's an unmistakable smell. And so the binding, the addition of salt and wine is achieving that low pH. And then the other thing that the bad guys need is free water, available water, unbound water, puddled water, droplets, unclaimed molecules. And you claim them by the mixing, by the thorough mixing. All the water is bound. Meat can bind a lot of water when it undergoes that friction, and particularly with the addition of some salt and some acid, it even increases the emulsification, is the other word for it, the binding of it. And maybe emulsification, that has to do more with fat, but whatever. And so it's binding the water and making it unavailable. And the salt itself is binding water molecules and making it unavailable to the bad bacteria, which need it to proliferate. And so you've created acid, you've removed water, and they don't like that. Bacteria doesn't like that. And then in those conditions, you've mixed everything, you've thoroughly incorporated all of the salt, you've bound all the water, it's pasty, you stuff it into casings. And I stuff it into the hog casings. And I do little horseshoes, and I just leave the ends long with some slack so I can tie them together. And where, the loop meets and under my knot is I hang them on a wood rod up in my shop. So that's the shape they have. And you want to hang them first in a very warm place. You want them to inoculate. So we're talking like up to 80 degrees, hot, a hot place in the house. And usually when we're doing this, it's late spring, early fall, and we might just be starting to fire up the wood stove to heat the house. And so
late spring, you mean late fall,
winter,
early winter.
Yeah.
Late fall, early winter. I thought you said spring there.
Yeah, maybe I did. Not late spring, early spring, if anything. We're still trying to figure out because we don't live in Italy.
We've tried every season except summer.
It's hard.
Put it that way, yeah.
But so we have some control over the warmth, and you want them to sit in there for a couple days, like 2 days, at least overnight, and then stick your head in amidst them and smell, and you will smell the tangification occurring, which is the drop in the pH. Yeah. Now, okay, so this is our method. That's right. I'm telling everyone about our method. All right, then I bring it out into the shop. And ideally, if I've timed it properly, the shop is going to be in the 50s degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity is going to be 80 to 95%, which is really high. And you would think in a place that gets as much precipitation as we do that there'd be no problem with that. That is not the case.
We have drier winters.
Yeah, our winters are bone dry. And even when we are getting rain, like if we'll be at 100% humidity in the shop. And I have a humidistat. It's just off the charts, but then the rain will stop for a minute and the clouds will break. And the humidity is just gone. Yeah. It's gone. It plummets. We're like at 20%, Wow. At least in the really volatile days in the spring, which happen to be kind of ideal in terms of temperature, but unreliable in terms of humidity. Yeah. So that is the juggling that I do with trying to cure salami here in the Pacific Northwest. And how long does it hang? I don't know, couple weeks, maybe 6 weeks, which is way more than a couple. And I just keep coming in and I feel it, and I want it to be dense. And I'll even just cut one and see what we're looking like in there. Yeah. And we might get some mold, hopefully. The mold is also another indication of acidification. If you get the white mold on the salami, it is a very good thing. That means the acidity is low. The pH is somewhere, down there at 4.5, 5.3 or something like that. And that is a good sign, so you want that. When I cut into them, I can always tell if it's a salami we can eat or not. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the other thing, that is rightly, warrants very draconian warnings about botulism. If you have the botulate toxin in a petri dish, you can't smell it, taste it. Like the lethal dose is so tiny that it is untastable and unsmellable, and you can't see it. So it is this invisible Trojan horse, the salami is. And if you eat it, you will die. And you won't know. Mm-hmm. So that is what that leads us to believe, the action of, the toxin in petri dish. But really, all bacteria occurs in an ecology. So there are other signs accompanying it, even if they aren't a direct result of the progress of Clostridium botulinum from a spore to a toxin, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Clostridium botulinum can only do its thing if the acidity is not low enough. Mm-hmm. And if there's free and available water. And that will have other results in the salami that you will be able to detect. And so when I make salami in the way I've just described, just 3% salt by weight, no nitrites and no starter cultures, I do not eat salamis that are case hardened, which is a thing that happens when it is too dry, which is kind of a lot out here, when the humidity is not high enough. Which means that when you slice the salami and look at the cross section, the exterior will be dry, but the interior still just looks like completely raw, squishy, moist meat.
Yeah.
That is a disruption in the ecology, so I have no idea what's fermenting in there.
Yeah.
And so we can't eat those. Mm-hmm. They don't stink. They don't reek. Mm-hmm. Okay, truth be told, I have tried them before, and they don't actually taste good either.
Yeah.
So they're not horrible though. It's not like with whole muscle cures where if they go off, it's like honking of ammonia or a restaurant dumpster in the middle of this July. Like it's not that, but it is still not good, and it's clearly not right. It's a disruption. What you want is a homogeneous drying of the full cross-section of the salami through the whole diameter. Mm-hmm. And that's very obvious when it happens, and it's beautiful, and it's sliceable, it's not squishy, and it tastes amazing. Yeah. It's just delicious. So that is how I've tried to make salami. Mm-hmm. And with, ups and downs. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and always the variable is the humidity. Yeah. That is the thing that I have the least control over here, and it's the hardest for me to predict when we will have that consistent humidity, because I kind of need it for a long time. Yeah. I need it for 4 weeks at least to be 80 to 95% humidity, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or in the 50s. I would say 50 to 60. There's variation in there.
And that I distinctly remember one of the first times you did it, at least while we were living at this house with this butcher shop, you did a successful round, and you started it like, I want to say late October, like November maybe. And then we were eating it and enjoying it all through Christmas that year. You knocked it out of the park. Mm-hmm. Then the next year, for some reason, I think we got busy. We we had Mary maybe. We had a baby. That's usually when things go south. Yeah. And you started the batch in like February or something. Yeah. And it didn't turn out. Mm-hmm. And then we started the next year. We started around in like December. Yeah. And that didn't turn out either. And I thought, okay, let's go back to the basics. Uh-huh. Start it in October again, because that's what worked last time. Yeah. That was this last fall. Yeah. And you did. And it didn't turn out. Yeah. And I was so disappointed. I thought, there just really is no system that we can rely on if we're relying on the environment. Yeah. Which we are. We are. I mean, we could just get a chamber. Yeah. And we're thinking about it, someday. But if you're just if you live in the Pacific Northwest and you're trying to use just the climate, there's just, unless you can predict the weather, then you just get lucky. And
Well, and I think part of that is because we're still trying to shove an Italian-shaped peg into a Pacific Northwest hole.
Yeah, I know.
That's a weird
We're
metaphor.
really
But,
stubborn.
yeah, it's not. We might actually have to change the recipe, which is something I'm embarking on, which is really intriguing, and I haven't quite gone any further because what we've just described is the very Italian salami.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how they do it in Spain, certain parts of Spain also.
It's the Mediterranean.
It's the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And
so we're realizing we're really slow in the uptake sometimes.
well, you don't know until you know. And
yeah.
we keep trying it. And I think what failed with the last batch was that we had cold snaps.
Yeah, it was like freezing in here.
Yeah,
it so really early in the year.
The salami was probably safe to eat. It was not fermenting at all. It wasn't going anywhere.
That's right.
And it was it was a refrigerator in here for weeks and weeks.
In November, it was just frozen.
Very cold. And when I cut into them, again, it was just like in stasis. It was not going anywhere for months and months and months until I did get the case hardening, and I tried a little bit, and it did not taste good. There was not really any fermentation going on. And so we lost that batch.
Yeah.
So now I'm, there's other, we had a Kai, Jamie come to one of our classes and recently, and he has been really pursuing fermenting salami in his wine cooler, just a little tiny wine cooler. And with great success. And he's tried lots of cool things. And he gave me a great tip that seems like an essential component to making salami in the Pacific Northwest, as opposed to the Mediterranean, which is doing a lot of the fermentation under refrigeration, which is brilliant. So what I described, we did the fermentation in the casing in a warm environment. And then we're still relying on a lot more of that fermentation to continue over the prolonged hanging period. But if you do it all in the refrigerator, it takes much longer, but it's controlled. And so what you would do is, and I haven't had a chance to really try this yet, is grind all of the meat, season it, and again, with 3% by weight, 2 to 3% by weight, and some glugs of wine, garlic and fennel, what have you. Mix it thoroughly, exactly how you would, and then you just put it in your fridge.
Yeah.
And you want to put something on top of it, like cling film or something. And
so uncased.
Uncased, bulk.
You are just fermenting it in a big pile of mush.
Yeah,
and to be honest,
it will ferment.
Yeah.
It'll just take a lot longer because it's cool. Your refrigerator is 35 to 41 degrees. Maybe not. I think more industrial fridges are 38 to 41 or something. And it'll take like a month. Give it like 30 days in there. And he's had a lot of success with this method, and he brought us salami, and it was just crazy delicious. So good. It had that unique flavor, not just the tangification of starter cultures, but actual unique, complex, multi-layered flavor.
Yeah.
And so that would be the next thing to try. And then after that 30-day period, the salami has done its essential acidifying ferment. Then you stuff it in the casings and you hang it to dry. And you still kind of need the good humidity, but it should take a little less time. The drying shouldn't take as long.
Yeah.
Because
so we'll try that next.
Yeah, I think that would be the thing to try. And then, there's also so many other, semi-cooked sausages, semi-cured, semi-cooked from Northern Europe, German and Polish sausage recipes.
Yeah.
That utilize that, and seeing as how we be in the north, that would probably be a good way to go.
Well, run us through some of the literature that you've stumbled upon that's been helpful to you.
Yeah.
In honing in on our approach or our approach in progress.
Yes. So the ones that I have used are, this one is good, by the Marianskis. This is called The Art of Making Fermented Sausages. and it is not an uncommon one, by Stanley and Adam Mariansky. And this one's great if you want the technical knowledge. I mean, graphs. I can't believe how thorough these guys are. It's really amazing.
For the science. What's happening
glucose, exactly the effect of nitrite, exactly the names of all the bacteria that create different flavors and acid, the names of all the molds and everything. It's really great. They document the fast fermenting process and the slow fermenting process. They define the exactly what Clostridium botulinum does, how they have charts, as to how to prevent, E. coli or Listeria or any clostridial bacteria. So that is a really good one to learn the vocabulary and learn the way bacteria functions. So that's excellent, and they've done a lot to restore lots of Polish recipes to existence. They have a big Central European restorative, like archaeological bank of really cool European products. They are. The only tricky thing about that book is that it's written by technicians, and so it can be ambiguous sometimes. It needed a little editing, in my humble opinion, from like a writer, I think, because those guys are just they're super intelligent and diligent, and they're technicians, and they can define everything perfectly. And sometimes you can get a little lost just in their writing style, in the language. It's a little confusing. Just know that it's not the technical information that is difficult to digest there.
But you do have to be committed.
You have to be committed. It's the writing style. Like there are some statements that they make in here that are just, upon first reading, utterly contradictory. You're like, oh my gosh. So which one is it?
You have to weed through it.
But you go through it again. What exactly are they saying? Because they are extremely precise. You have to really pay attention, and you'll get it. So that is a great one.
Going from that to someone who can write.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So aesthetically motivated, as it were. These are the other sources are the River Cottage. And you will see these guys decried to no end in a lot of really pseudo-professional hobbyists online, the River Cottage, because they unapologetically and without draconian caveats tell you how to make salami without nitrite and starter cultures. And these are the only recipes I've found for that in the English language, is these guys.
Yeah.
And this one is great. This is Steve Lamb's handbook, River Cottage handbook number 13 on curing and smoking. And he goes into the science with you and how it works and why it works to do it without the starter cultures. But without, taking sides. It's you do what you like.
Yeah.
Here's the way you would do it if you wanted to do.
We love their non-polarizing, very non-American approach to this.
It's not argumentative at all. They're not opposed to nitrites. And neither am I.
It's just not for them.
Yeah. But
that's how they actually put it sometimes.
Yeah. So this one is great. It's well written, and it's all geared towards the small scale, which is, I should say, what all of this is geared toward.
Right.
This entire podcast. This is not. You would not be able to make salami the way I have described for retail, unless you work extensively and expensively with the USDA and some writing new HACCPs and variances to the food code.
I was actually going to get to that.
Yeah. But that's a whole different story. So this is all for home consumption. Yes, this is a good one. And then he's got a similar recipe in the River Cottage cookbook. Ironically, it is not in the River Cottage meat book. It's in the cookbook. And he's got a salami recipe in here, as well as this.
Got a whole pig section in there. Really.
Yeah, which includes the raising and the cooking and the curing of a pig, which is awesome. That book was really a significant inspiration for us, and still is today. So really good stuff in there. Other than that, any American book will have that overplayed draconian warnings about botulism
just pages
and
and
food poisoning.
pages, whereas like the River Cottage just spent a paragraph or two describing add 2-3% by weight.
Yeah.
Treat it like fresh sausage.
Yeah.
Except hang it.
Yeah.
He's really just simplistic.
It is, and it's not because he is irresponsible or unscientific.
Yeah.
It's because we do actually understand the conditions wherein Clostridium botulinum can proliferate, and if we provide the hurdles of a low pH, bound water,
Healthy pork,
and enough salt, it'll be okay. Mm-hmm. That's not just a devil may care,
Right.
Oh, it'll just be fine. It's not that.
We are feeding our families here.
It's also taking into account another essential element when developing your food science that is too often rejected as viable data, because everyone before the scientific revolution is a moron and everyone after is a genius, and which is obviously not true. And so the data of history is often rejected, whereas I think what we have in history is lots of phenomena that need to be scientifically described rather than rejected for the prescription of a different method. And this is how salami has been made for centuries, and that is not unimportant. Mm-hmm. That needs to be described. How does that work then? Well, then how? How have we been able to do that and not die? Mm-hmm. And it is in the name of liability and all the draconian warnings that I have seen the most unscientific claims made. Mm-hmm. And it drives me nuts because it has the appearance and the discourse of scientific legitimacy behind it. And among them are like why they say, well, salami does mean the Latin word is botulus. It's like implying that people die of this so frequently that they named it botulism in Rome. It's
and continued to make it that way.
Bad history, bad claim, bad etymology drives me nuts. Mm-hmm. Botulus was the Latin word for sausage, not death. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't used to refer to the phenomena of food poisoning caused by the Clostridium botulinum toxin. Wasn't used in that way until the 19th century when they discovered, isolated, and described Clostridium botulinum and the toxin and the spore. So there's just it's almost like because it is so dangerous, we can have flights of zealous, fear-mongering about it. It's like, no, that's not scientific. That is bad. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. Another one that is really frustrating to me is that pretty much any American that goes to Europe and learns from the Europeans changes the European recipe to include nitrates and starter cultures. Mm-hmm. So in Europe, they're still doing it this way, which is why I value the River Cottage, because they're a European source written in the English language, which is the one that I read, and they tap into that tradition. So like even, in Spain, this is a fun book to get, Charcuteria. This is my newest edition. A lot of fun. Mm-hmm. By Jeffrey Weiss, maybe. But it's wonderful. And, he's more even-handed about it. He'll say, a lot of the matanzas, where they did a lot of the processing, they didn't use any curing salts. But then he goes on to prescribe it in all of his recipes, which is fine. Mm-hmm. The ones that get to me are when they travel Europe. And I have one particular work in mind, kind of popular. And it just blew my mind, but they go through all of Italy discovering all of the salumeria recipes. And they say that no salumieri, which I think is how you say it, salami curer, that they talked to admitted to using nitrates and starter cultures.
Yeah. Tricky little word there.
Yeah, and it's like, what a backwards way to accuse them all of lying. Mm-hmm. Like I just don't like that. It seemed very silly to me. Mm-hmm. It's like, so are you going to receive the data or just assume they're all lying? Yeah. You have to be able to
twist your own narrative
a little bit,
or accommodate.
Because what if they actually say what they do and they aren't using any?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
we might
is
have to learn.
Likely. I don't know why they would be interested in lying about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, we got to describe that phenomena, describe why it works with all of our scientific apparatuses and methods, and describe it because it's data.
We have to be able to accommodate, what comes first, theory or the practice?
Right.
And sometimes we get so attached to a particular theory that we're not open to, well, it actually is operating this way in practice.
Yeah.
So
maybe
we should change our theory.
Because you work yourself into the very unscientific place of saying, well, it works in practice, but does it work in theory?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So all of that to say, to make peasant home-cured salami without nitrate and starter cultures, you don't have to cast off the scientific food science.
Yeah.
Exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
You take on the onus of having to describe things more accurately, without waffling, without exaggerated claims in either direction. So educate yourself. And I say I found this one, The Art of Making Fermented Sausages, to be the most beneficial in that regard for me, by Stanley Mariansky and Adam Mariansky.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to, you kind of brushed over it, but I wanted to actually flesh it out. So, and it's a good distinction you made, that all this that we're talking about is more on the domestic level of home meat production. So, which precludes if you wanted to retail this stuff. You might be able to do this, but we've never found anyone in America that can, well, maybe one. But the hoops you got to jump through, and the full-time employees that you have to hire to help you. You can't just make sausage, make salami if you want to sell it. You have to then, you have to hire a full-time HACCP writer, basically, if you want to accommodate the policies that are in place for a good reason, because we have an entire food system that necessitates it.
It's the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. So can you talk a little about policy and your experience, I guess, with it?
Yeah, it's pretty limited because I've never sold a salami before, ever.
And we
so
don't
I've
want
never
to.
had to jump through the hoops. But as I understand it, basically you have to, anyone in the food industry is familiar with these things, you have to write a hazard analysis of critical control points, which is otherwise known as a HACCP. And that, as I understand it, is an extensive document describing why your salami, in this case, reaches is safe at several points during its processing. So a lot of that would be pH monitoring. You have to show the inspector, the USDA, in fact, how your salami recipe at every stage is not in the danger zone of temperature during the critical points, again, during the critical times when that would be a problem.
Room temperature spots.
And that it reaches a 5.3 pH or less, or lower during certain critical control points in the recipe. Yeah. So all of those things, none of it actually prescribes the use of nitrite or starter cultures. You just have to show that you reach the acidity at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think the acidity would be the key component there, and maybe even water activity.
Okay.
And when you get into that, again, because I'm not sure, but a lot of that requires some expensive apparatus. So, you have the little pH strips that you can mash up a little bit of the ground meat in a mortar and pestle with some distilled water, and you dip the strips in there to see where the pH is at. And I don't know if the USDA might accept that. I think that those are relatively rough measures of pH. And again, they would really only work when you're doing the method of the primary fermentation occurring bulk, uncased. So in a tub, in a fridge. That's where the fermentation is occurring. And so you test that, because that meat is accessible to your pH strip and your mortar and pestle and your distilled water. And then the other one would be, what am I saying? Oh, the other instrument. If you wanted to upgrade from the pH strip, we're talking about probes that test pH that you could stick into a salami or stick into the meat mass. And those are very complex tools, to be precise. Mm-hmm. And pretty expensive, but like all technology, and I haven't looked in a while, and it could be that just in the last few months, there could be so many that are less expensive now that would work just beautifully for that. One place I would look that just comes to mind where I have seen a lot of these apparatuses is the butcher's pantry, and I think we've referred to them before.
Yeah, we have.
And they're a great resource, and they have a lot of really cool pH probes. Some are, like way over $1,000, and some in a couple $100 range. Some that are Bluetooth and linked to your iPhone, and you have constant tracking of the pH.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool to the apparatus that you can get.
And not to mention the labor involved in doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if a business owner is going to go that route. He or she they're not going to be the ones able to do that. It almost sounds like they'd have to hire someone
to write the HACCP. Yeah. And that's not even the only document, because then once you write the HACCP, I think, is then approved, and then you have to follow that. That is your recipe, basically, and you can never deviate from it. And you have to ensure that every batch, by way of a checklist, goes through each of the critical control points.
Yeah, wow. So it's not just a one-time thing. It's like you got to just
you have
do
to
this.
follow it, and then you keep a log, and they check the log, when they inspect you, and understandable.
And this sounds exhausting to us, but if this is someone else's business, and they can schedule it in, and it just hasn't been a route that we've wanted to pursue, but it might be doable if someone had a partner and they could divvy up all of the obligations and duties, and that'd be great. It'd be great to go for it and let us know how it goes.
There's also another document that is the variance.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I think that is more, and again, I don't know, I haven't actually seen these documents, but this is just, being in the world and talking to people, but that is actually getting an exception to the way things have been produced for so long. Okay. Because there are HACCPs out there that you can just adopt, right? If you're going to make salami. They need HACCPs for every hazard food. So anything that can go bad, dairy has lots of HACCPs. And it's much easier just to adopt a pre-existing recipe, essentially, a pre-existing HACCP, and meet those critical control points that have already been established, rather than blaze your own trail with a variance and try to write a new HACCP for a new salami that reaches those points without nitrate and starter cultures. And it's not hopeless. I used to think it was, but it's not. It's just hard work, which means it's totally doable. Yeah. I feel like it would, like you said, it would result in it would work in a partnership where someone can focus on the making of salami and the formation of the recipe, and someone else can work directly with the USDA and be a mediator. Yeah. And help and I know some people that do that. And that are looking to do that more on a consulting level, that have that incredibly thankless task, but incredibly valuable skill of wading through USDA regulations and being the contact to help draft those things. So all of that to say, it's not like it's prohibited to sell nitrate and starter culture free salamis at all. It is not. You just have to do some work to prove to them it's safety. Yeah. And I people should do that. Salami VLS, I think, is one place that has done that in New York. Yeah. So it can be done. Yeah. People should do it. Get some real salami out there that is an expression of place. Yeah. And the shop, even. It is delicious when it turns out. Yeah. It's amazing. It's our favorite thing. I mean, our kids. It is. It goes way too fast. Yeah. I know. If we had a reliable way to make it, we would make hundreds of pounds. Yeah. Annually. Well, and we're playing with the idea of trying to get a little. Well, maybe the new way will work out. The way that Jamie mentioned to us. He reminded us about. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like, yes, we can continue to work on our Pacific Northwest fermented sausage. And we could also make salami in a curing chamber.
Yeah.
Let's just do both.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, on that note, is there anything else we're missing? I've covered everything that I wanted to about salami, seasonality and regionality.
Yeah, I think that the only other thing comes to mind that I find myself thinking about when I make salami is the ill definition of fears, which we kind of already talked about. What could go wrong in the bacon or in any cured thing? And there's one little trick of language that happens where people say, well, what about botulism?
Yeah.
And what they mean, well, they're not sure what they mean. And that's the thing. They're not sure. But botulism is not just like a synonym for food poisoning. Botulism is one very particular kind of food poisoning. Botulism is the result of one kind of spore from one kind of bacteria, a clostridial bacteria. And so it really helps to not use generalizing terms, because you'll hear even in some American written cookbooks, which tend to be the most draconian, unfortunately, they will lack precision. And I think it's especially when you're talking about bacteria and botulism, it's good to be precise, because then you've defined the threat, and when you define it, you know what it is, and you can actually neutralize it. And so the way you combat it is different. If you're going to fight botulism as a general synonym of food poisoning, then just radiate all your sausage.
Yeah.
Just give it a pseudo cooking step and nuke it all. But if you're going to actually combat Clostridium botulinum and the spore that it produces and the toxin in an anaerobic environment, then that's a very particular game plan. That is, we're going to bind all the water. We're going to ensure that there is a low pH. We're going to salt it properly. We're going to allow it to ferment to utilize the water and decrease the pH further, and then hang it to slowly dry.
Yeah.
And that is a very narrow and well-aimed sniper strategy.
Yeah.
That's not the shotgun blast at all food poisoning.
Yeah.
You're aiming at Clostridium botulinum,
right.
And making that one impossible.
Yeah.
So just define it well, and because then you know what to do. You have a strategy.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's good. That way we're not aiming in the dark, shooting in the dark. That's actually more accurate.
Yeah. And
more gives you more certainty too.
Right.
And more confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I really want to put the call out there for people to find, if they can, cited, reliable instances.
Yeah, we've had a few food scientists come to our classes before, and it just hasn't worked out for them to take us up on this. But
yeah, no one holds it in their head, obviously. But I ask everyone, and whether or not they have encountered cases of botulism from salami, as we have defined it today, at all, if that has ever happened. Yeah. Because I have this strange suspicion, if it has not happened, then the threat in salami is theoretical, which is not nothing, but it is theoretical, rather than actual citations of cases. Yeah. And I think, even if we were to find some botulism cases with salami as we've described it, there would be some significant deviations. Yeah. Some significant errors, because ultimately it's a simple thing, and it's a very ancient thing that has worked. Yeah. Things tend to stop being popular when they kill people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just kind of a thing that we do. We don't keep doing those things. Yeah, yeah. Except for war and stuff, but that's a different conversation. Not food.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Meatsmiths, and thanks for meeting our latest addition to the family. Oh,
there you go.
She's a fan of her dairy.
Yeah.
And she's giving me the cross eyes right now. It's so cute.
She likes raw milk.
See if you can get the cross-eyed.
Don't. Not gonna do it.
All right. Well, remember to meet us in Minnesota if you can on October 19th, or coming out to Vashon. We've got some 3-day classes that are filling up, and we'd love to meet you and add you to the family. And then if you can't get out here, can't get out to Minnesota, try to become a patron if you can, to help us keep producing these and to upgrade our production quality and quantity, and we're moving in that direction, folks. So come on in for the ride. It's going to be really fun, and see what we can do in the next handful of months together. So
yeah, linking the killing with the cooking.
Yes,
It's the first part of every recipe.
that's right. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Meatsmiths. We'll see you next time.
Bye.